Hello, and welcome to the Bible Guy. Which Bible translation should I read? There can often be much confusion in the religious world with all the different types of translations: NIV, ESV, NASB, King James Version, the Message, all these different translations of the Bible. Which one should I read? I go to a church and they read a different version than somewhere else. And there even are people that say there must only be one translation that you read. What is actually the truth? What is the best translation to read? I'm going to give my own personal bit of advice on this at the end, and it is actually what I do. But you'll see a scale there that describes from left to right. You've got word for word, thought for thought, or paraphrase. These are broadly speaking, the different types of translations. On the left, the word for word, a more literal translation, is they've taken the literal Greek word and translated it into an English equivalent word. Then in the middle, you have thought for thought, where they take the thought of the passage, not necessarily every single word, and translate it to thought. And then in the paraphrase option, it's much more free, where someone's decided this is what they think it means and they've interpreted it. And that's a broad spectrum of translations there. One, different pros and cons for each. It's often been said that a good way to study the Bible would be, if you're a very serious Bible student, that you should go for the word for word, what's called formal equivalence of type of translation, like an New American Standard Bible, ESV, a Holman's Bible, or sorry, the Amplified Bible. That you should go with that route, and then thought for thought is more readable but less serious, maybe less serious Bible study. And then for those who are even less serious, you've got the Message and all those down in the paraphrase section. Well, what is actually the best option here? Well, I think there are pros and cons to each of these different styles. And just to say, I don't always think that it's best to read a literal word for word translation. Just an interesting point on that. If you read 1 Corinthians 7, verse 36, Paul talks about how you should act towards the virgin you're engaged to in terms of referring to marriage. And in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 36, we'll look at what the NIV says, and then look at what a more literal translation says. So 1 Corinthians 7:36, the NIV is, if anyone thinks he's acting improperly towards the virgin he's engaged to. So that's describing the relationship with the man and his virgin. King James Version says, if a man thinks that he behaveth himself uncommonly towards his virgin, but it doesn't describe the relationship status that they're engaged. But the NASB, which is considered the gold standard for literal accuracy, and this specifically is the literal NASB of 1995, and its literal translation, it actually says in 1 Corinthians 7:36, if a man thinks he is acting unbecomingly towards his virgin daughter. So in attempting to translate the words literally, which sometimes is very difficult to do when you've got a Greek language of 5 million words translating into an English language of 1 million words, they can't always get the idioms across to describe what they mean. And in this attempt, they'd actually not done a great job at all, and a very confusing sentence, which is a bit disturbing. I shared this recently and people were like, oh, that doesn't sound like a good sentence, that a man acts unbecomingly towards his virgin daughter. Hopefully that did not make sense, and that's not actually what the original writer meant. And for me, the reading in NIV reads quite well. But it's just to say, sometimes you would think the literal word for word is the best. It doesn't always work out that way. And here's my bit of advice then, just to close this off. The best bit of advice I have for myself and anyone, what's the best version to read? The one that helps you connect to God the best. For me personally, having read many different translations, I still prefer the New International Version, which you'll see is bang in the middle there of the dynamic equivalence, thought for thought. It's very, very readable. It's been written that way, but it's also described by many as very accurate. Also, it's accurate, maybe not as word for word accurate as other versions on the other end of the scale, but for me, this is what I do. But here's also what I do. So I would say to you to read the version that you find most readable, potentially, or that you connect with best. But here's what I also do. I also consult a more literal version often whenever I looking into more deep serious study, or when I want to understand what the meaning a bit more, or the literal words mean. I take the general meaning, thought for thought, but I also consult the ESV quite often, almost every other day, when I want to understand what the word means. In this case, on this version, I wanted the 1 Corinthians 7, I certainly wanted to do it. So that's a bit of advice I have for us. Pick the version you find readable, that you connect to God best, but also have a literal version that you go to, maybe the NASB, not that 1995 version, and also the ESV or the Amplified Bible. Go to a more literal translation for the sake of accuracy. I hope this has helped us today. If it has, please hit the like button. Please share it on for other people, and let's get his word out there.